Welcome to the Young Crones Cafe, where you can get a magic brew full of all sorts of information, both witchy and practical.
Grab a cup of coffee and join us. I'm Elizabeth, a wordsmith.
And I'm Dave, a modern-day sage.
We are going to talk about various witchcraft and life topics from a slightly more mature perspective, at least most of the time.
Thanks for joining us.
Today's metaphysical kernel of thought is Dark Night of the Soul. The origin of this term appears to be from a 16th century poem written by a Spanish Carmelite priest, St. John of the Cross, 1542 to 1591 CE, who had a reputation as a mystic. At that time, a mystic was an individual who spent much time in religious contemplation. He described it as agony accompanied by confusion and uncertainty, where one doubts the existence of God and personal faith. Best modern description might be a period of utter spiritual desolation, disconnection, and emptiness, in which one feels totally separated from your own internal and the external divine. There is a void where one feels like nothing is working, nothing is worth doing, and nothing makes sense anymore. There are those who call it a spiritual depression and describe the symptoms as a deep sense of sadness, which often verges on despair, sometimes triggered by a crisis in one's life, an acute sense of feeling unworthy of joy or faith, a constant feeling of being lost and that life is now empty, painful feelings of powerlessness and hopelessness about making any changes, feeling unable to act or carry out normal activities, a loss of interest or joy in activities previously enjoyed, feelings that something untangible or intangible is missing that cannot be named. This experience is very real and is experienced by many who walk a spiritual path. It is perfectly normal to question your beliefs and whether or not you are moving in the right directions. The only way out is to walk through the uncomfortable feelings, to ask yourself the hard questions it engenders, to choose to have faith that will eventually end. There are no time frames for how long it will last, no magic spells to make it go away, no one who can explain it to you. However, those of us on the path have also experienced these times and know that they have created a deeper and changed spirituality when we emerge. Know that you can walk through, that you are not alone, that you will survive. Okay, so tonight we're getting into what we might consider one of the heavier topics in our metaphysical kernels of thought discussions, the dark night of the soul. Can we sound appropriately whatever?
Good evening.
Good evening, yes. Good evening, yes.
And this actually sort of lines up really good because I just, the most recent blog post on the twoyoungcrones.com blog talks about this same thing that we're talking about tonight with Dark Nights of the Soul. And it's also just happens to be a dark moon tonight. So, things are just sort of aligned up. This should be a fun talk.
I think so. I mean, it's kind of cool when you think that the term has been around for well over, 600 years or so.
Right.
So it's got to be a real thing.
And it also, just sort of diving right into that, the topic and being in that place where everything is so deep in despair and you're disconnected and you don't know if there is God and you don't know if you are real and you're just right at the edge. When you were describing that through the reading, what I heard is it's the absolute polar opposite or the balance to an ecstatic state or ecstasy. When people are so filled with the power of the universe or the power of their particular deity that they are just aglow. Mm-hmm. That ecstasy must, in a balanced universe, mean that there are times and there are moments during our lives where we are going to have the other extreme. So,
that's a really good way to put it.
It's not that anything is any more right or any more wrong with the universe than these nights are for us, it's just that's where we are for those times. And at least for myself, the times that I can look back and point at what I would consider to be a dark night of the soul, every single one of them was a moment where I grew and I learned something. So when we look at the topic of despair and we look at the idea of dark night, we need to know as human beings that these are moments that we will survive. These are the moments that make us who we are. This is where we learn our magic and we gain our healing and everything else.
I think so. And when you are in it, you can't explain it to anybody else why it happened. It isn't like you planned it. This is something else I think people need to recognize, is that it kind of creeps up on you. It's not like all of a sudden you fell into the abyss. It's a gradual slide down in most, it can be.
In most cases, I'm going to agree with you, but there are exceptions. I mean, the paragraph talks about, sometimes they're triggered by crisis and that kind of thing, and that's more common. But it does just, at least for some of us, just a bolt out of the blue, all of a sudden, bang, I have no hope for anything. And they've always been really profound experiences for me, but here again, I've survived them all. So, I try to emphasize the growth and that, there was a young lady that I was talking to this afternoon in the store, and she was very, very, very upset. Mm-hmm. And all I could think of to say to her was, this is just this moment. I know that you are hurting, but your whole life is not going to be about hurting. You're not always, always, always going to feel the way that you feel at this moment. And I almost feel like that ties right into this, because when we are in that place of despair, we feel like this is it, and we are always going to feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And we can have those feelings, or people can have those feelings, like you said, it's a crisis or whatever, and not be actively walking a spiritual practice like we do, that we call the path. Some of the biggest, how do I explain this? When Sue and I were creating this tradition and looking back at things, it was after one of these periods where it didn't seem like anything worked and we didn't feel connected to ourselves and our, what we had been doing, when we got together and sat down and said, it's not working anymore. And what do we need to change?
And yeah, I can remember just from afar seeing the two of you go through that together. And thank you so much. That was a wonderful memory just then.
Oh, no problem. But the idea is individuals, when we're in the middle of that, it is okay to say what I have been doing isn't working, and take stock of what you've been doing and figure out not necessarily why, because that's kind of pointless, because it's not working. Sometimes you need to know the why, and sometimes you just need to say, okay, what do I need to do differently?
Sure, and I think that's part of the process. At least for me, I kind of use a pit as a metaphor. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the pit, you'll take a moment to understand either how or why, or at least try to understand how or why that you're in this pit. Mm-hmm. And then you'll understand what it's going to take, and you begin to climb. The idea at that point is you are so self-aware that there is nowhere to go but up, and there's no way to go up. There's no direction. You aren't going anywhere until you can free yourself from this pit. Mm-hmm. And while that has a despair or desperate sound to it, one of the notes that I wrote after reading this was, we need to look into the holes that we have crawled from. We need to look back down into them, the holes that we have crawled from, to really understand how it is that we have grown.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have these moments, or when we're seeing someone else have these moments or these days or what have you, the compassion there is to realize that this is going to be a better human being when they get through this.
Mm-hmm.
Just right now, they're not able to see that.
No. And sometimes all you can do is say, we've had our own pits.
Sure.
And let them know that it's okay to feel this way.
Well, I think that, and it's a universal trait of compassion, but I have to at least acknowledge how much of that I learned in different 12-step programs, simply because it just makes so much sense,
I agree. Having been involved with 12-step programs for a long time, it's crazy. It's like when you surrender, you win.
Yeah.
Okay. And surrender doesn't mean giving up either. It's like an acknowledgement more than anything else.
The analogy that I've been using frequently lately is that I used to spend so much time trying to drive the universe, with my hands gripping on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And it was actually, you probably know her too, Gloria from the store.
I know Gloria.
She gave me this one reading, and what I heard from it was basically take your hands off the wheel, put your hands at the back of your head, and treat life like a water slide.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I heard from her. And I have to say, so many things have changed for me, and that's just in sort of a recent context. But the fact of the matter is, things are happening in my life much better with me not driving the universe than they ever were going to be with me trying to micromanage.
Yes, I agree. I think this may sound stupid, but anybody who has any experience with recovery, we know that as active addicts, we were control freaks.
Absolutely. Yep. And we also became, at least in my experience towards the tail end, we became experts in despair. Absolutely. We turned it into an art form and into a lifestyle, at least during those times in our lives.
Oh, sure. And we're kind of off the spiritual topic, but when you think about it, it's the same thing.
Absolutely.
In that spiritual despair. You try everything you can to make it stop when you think about it.
Sure.
Feelings of despair and all of that. And sometimes, as we say in the reading, you just got to walk through it. And it will get better. You will find new ways of doing things. You find that you're more spiritual than you ever were when you find your connections in a different way. Or you change what you did in ritual last Tuesday.
And these are universal truths too. They apply to culture. They apply to spiritualism. Sure.
And life itself, when you think about it. But I think the biggest takeaway I want people to get, if they're listening to this, is that yes, dark nights of the soul happen. They happen to everybody. Sometimes there's a really good reason you lose somebody you love. Your best friend moves to the other side of the world, whatever it is, that's a crisis. And sometimes you look and you don't see exactly how you fell into the pit or started to slide down into the pit.
Well, and in some cases, this can even be a medical condition or something that triggers this too. There are forms of despair that come from types of mental illness that this still resonates true, in that the most encouraging thing that I usually want to do is say, you, in fact, the other day, you actually said it to me in a text. Because I sent you a text about this was going on and that was going on, and you said, hey, live through it.
Yeah.
But by God, at that moment, that turned me around from the brink of going down one of those pits or those spirals simply by realizing, yeah, she's right. I'm going to tell her tomorrow that this wasn't any big deal. I'm already there.
Yeah, see, this is it. And sometimes just hearing people say you just live through it.
Yep, I get it. It's a bad.
You come out the other side, and it is not said without compassion and caring either.
Absolutely
when you give somebody that advice, but sometimes you just got to walk through shit.
Yeah.
And you just have to, and if nothing else, you have that blind faith that you will get out the other side, and that things are going to
and the reward is, like I said, at least in my experience, I always come out of those experiences having grown and become a better Dave,
Oh, yeah. Or a better Elizabeth or a better Sue, or, we have a better spiritual practice going on.
Yeah, well, and just a quick shout out to the people that are listening. Absolutely come on in and join us at the Young Crones Cafe. We're on Patreon now, so if you go in there and you're willing to help us out with a cup of coffee, we've got a Discord set up, and let's see if we can get this community off the ground.
Yeah, we are seriously working at it. I think.
You've got a couple upcoming interviews and working on some radio spots maybe, and seeing if we can get this to blow up.
A little bit. I know we have people who listen, and it brings me joy knowing that you and though we do have great conversations here in your basement, as it were, but it's just nice to know that we're not just talking to each other all the time.
Absolutely. Yep. There's a community up there that we just haven't met yet.
Exactly. I like how you put that.
Thank you.
That was great.
So Dark Nights of the Soul are definitely a part of the process of living. And from the perspective or the point of view of the path is that we try to acknowledge them and point at them for what they are, and understand that is simply another way to look at it could be molting, in that we are shedding something in some way and becoming something new again.
I like that. I think that's a really good way to describe it, because very often, I know for Sue and I, when one of us hit that, it was because what we were doing didn't satisfy what we were becoming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cause I can remember, the folks that you were practicing with and whatnot when you went through some of those transitions, and you really sort of realized that, no, there is something magical here.
Yeah, I think so. At its most basic, and we kept coming back to that magical.
Yeah.
And we saw it differently. We worked with it differently, but at its heart, our spiritual practice is one of magic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that joy that magic brings.
And those moments out there when you are feeling like you are in the absolute pits of despair, just remind yourself that the other side of that pendulum, or the other side of that wheel or cycle or whatever, are those moments when we lean on the front porch railing and look up at the morning sky and just want to weep for a minute, because the universe is so perfect. So
yeah, exactly.
Dark Nights of the Soul are simply just the mirror or the balance to those happiest moments of our lives.
Yeah, and I think that is the best way to describe it. On the path, we value balance more than anything else. And as I have said to the kids, you can't know happy unless you know sad.
Sure. Absolutely.
You can't know light, and you can't describe light without dark. It's those wonderful dichotomies.
Yep.
Rearing their ugly head again. Sue and I used to get going and find as many as we could.
I don't know the movie, but it's one of my auditory memories that I capture, where the one character says, basically a modernized or a paraphrased version of the old saying, "It is better to have loved and lost than have never loved at all." And the other character in the movie looks at him and says, "Try it.
Yeah.
And just that concept alone to me sort of gives me that perspective of a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And having gone through losing my mom and then losing Susie, it wasn't the darkest moment the night that she passed. It just told me that there would be a dark moment, and I did have it, and it was a few weeks long.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, I'm a new human being as a result of it. So,
You think so?
yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
Can I remind you again, in case you forget, I really like the New Day?
You know, I've heard that once or twice lately. It's starting to get to my head. So,
Maybe you'll catch on. But yeah, I think that's important, that people need to hear that it isn't endless, even though it feels like it when you're in the middle of it too.
well, and that's just it. And that's I love talking with you, and I also love the day job that I have, simply because I can be that one voice in a person's day that says, "Yeah, I get it, and you're going to get through this, and this is all just going to be fine, and it's just another page in your journal. Go walk it." And I get a chance to be encouraging after a long time of not seeing things that way.
Yes, I agree.
As I described to somebody the other day, I think on the way out, Susie just turned around and threw a blast of love and compassion at me, and I'm okay with that.
I would be too. We will not discuss the fact that she seems to be showing up in my head with whispers of something else to write, but we'll leave that one alone, won't we?
Absolutely. Well, and for our listeners that are wondering when and whether or not there's been whispers or whatnot, Elizabeth and I are working on getting ready to release the third version of the past series of books, or the third chapter.
Mm-hmm.
That should be coming up sometime in the next few weeks or months. So just sort of a little sneak peek at it. What's the working name that we have?
Ritual practices for traditions of the path.
Ritual practices for the tradition of the path. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. We're going to include like the traditional solar cycle, throw in a bit of lunar cycle, where we focus a little bit on the fact that we do celebrate the dark nights of the moon, which are supposedly this horrible time where you're not supposed to do anything, which is we've discovered is a load of bullshit. But that's
in this book is also going to have a quite a bit deeper and actually sample rituals and whatnot for doing the ingress, congress, and egress cycle.
Yeah, for the cross-border times.
Yeah. So having that time zone and that information all into one volume is going to be handy.
I think so, for a lot of people, if they want to try it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if you want to read it and let us know through an email or whatever that we're nuts, that's fine too.
Yep. There's a form on our website where you can drop me a message or whatever, or come see us and leave us a message on Patreon.
Exactly. Of course, that may mean you actually have to pay for a cup of coffee, but that's beside the point. So before this gets any crazier this evening, this might be a good time to wind it up. Unless you have something you wish to add.
I have covered the things that I took on the notes when we read together beforehand, and I've had a chance to share some great energy and a couple of cups of coffee with a dear friend.
There you go. So with that, may you find mercy and reverence in all things.
Be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Witch stones are a divination tool we created as part of our practice that deals with what we call concrete stones, specific types and kinds of energy, and conceptual stones, things and ideas about witchcraft, which can be read with either a seen or an unseen meaning. Recently, we have developed a set of oracle cards using this information. We would like to introduce you to one of these stones right now.
Today's Witchstone Spotlight topic is to cover the first 4 of our mental concept cards within the concept card set. The 16 concept cards are divided into 2 sets of 8, mental concepts and physical concepts. Each set of 8 has a 2-colored border relating to both the elements and to the concept of as above, so below, or as below, so above. So when you see a 2-colored border, you know that this stone is a concept and not a concrete stone. The mental concepts move energy from above to below with white or air on top and black or earth on the bottom. The air element is associated with thoughts and ideas, which can then lead to the earth element, where some type of personal development takes place. While we've already talked about the individual characteristics of these first 4 mental concept cards, today we're looking at how they can relate to the concept types, mental or physical, the energies, projective and receptive, the corresponding time of year in our year cycle, the corresponding moon phase, and the type of thoughts to process for those of us on the path. So our first 4 mental concept cards are Dark God, Light God, the Divine, and the Void. All 4 of these mental concept cards, and indeed all 8 of this set, again, lead to process from the element of air using our thoughts and ideas down to the element of earth, where we manifest our personal development and growth. The cards are as follows. The Dark God card represents a mental concept with receptive energies. Its solar cycle timing is associated with the dark half of the year, while its lunar cycle corresponds to the dark or new moon. This card represents the use of thoughts and ideas and air concept to create personal development and earth concept. And the thoughts to process for this card are knowledge to personal integration. The light card represents a mental concept with projective energies. Its solar cycle timing is associated with the light half of the year, while its lunar cycle corresponds to the full moon. This card represents the use of thoughts and ideas and air concept to create personal development and earth concept. The light God thought to process for this card are new ideas to change. The Divine card represents a mental concept with projective energies. Its solar cycle timing is associated with the light half of the year, while its lunar cycle corresponds to the full moon. This card represents the use of thoughts and ideas, again an air concept, to create personal development and earth concept. The thoughts to process for the Divine card are connections to our personal work or questing. The Void card represents a mental concept with receptive energies. Its solar cycle timing is associated with the dark half of the year, while its lunar cycle corresponds to the dark or new moon. This card represents the use of thoughts and ideas to create personal development. The thoughts to process for the Void card are questions to answers or no answers. Dark God and the Void cards are mental concepts with receptive energies. They correspond together to the dark half of the year and to the dark or the new moon. The Light God and the Divine cards are mental concepts with projective energies. They correspond to the light half of the year and to the full moon. They all 4 of these cards, represent the use of thoughts and ideas and air concept to help create personal development and earth concept. Each has its own unique thoughts to process, which lead to its lessons for us.
We have heard from some of our listeners who appreciate what we are talking about in our segments, but are asking for spells or about spells. Can you give me a spell for this or that? I want to be able to fill in the blank here, find love, romance, money, etc. Since you asked, we are adding a small segment to some of our podcasts going forward that we are calling Practical Magic for the Everyday Witch.
These are simple spells we use that don't require a lot of ingredients for correspondences, or sometimes no ingredients at all. Because we like to be able to use magic to deal with the practical everyday stuff, this is what we have to share. However, the biggest reminder about spellcraft is that the best spells are the ones you create for yourself, because they are a part of your own magic. Actually, there are 3 important components to any spell. Number 1 is setting your intent. This means that you need to be able to state clearly and precisely what you want your spell to do and how you want it to be done. Number 2 is ingredients. Any physical items you need to cast your spell, such as candles or herbs, or to act as correspondences, which are representations of something physical that you don't have right in front of you or are trying to come up with or manifest. Finally, number 3 is some sort of way to raise energy. After all spells are powered by energy, and there are a number of different ways to raise this type of energy, including chanting or various movements.
We all have those times when we just can't find something we need. Usually our car keys. We know we left it right somewhere, now it's gone, and we need it back right this minute. This quick spell is all about finding something, usually something small, that you have misplaced. As always, your intent is important. Your intent is, I will find the item I am missing right now. All you need for this spell is yourself. And here's the spell chant to raise energy. As I open my eyes, I turn to see my missing item in front of me. Now, go to the place where you know you last saw that item that you lost. Close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, 1 for body, 1 for mind, and 1 for spirit to center yourself. Now open your eyes, turn in a circle while you're repeating the spell chant, which is, one more time, as I open my eyes, I turn to see my missing item in front of me. Now you've finished your circle, pick up your lost item and go on with whatever you were trying to do, because it's right there for you to grab.
Before we go, we would like to present you with a tip or trick or witchy hint, just something to make your day go better, because we live in a mixture of the magical and the mundane.
Today's tip, trick, or witchy hint is a protective pyramid for your home. The weather is trying its best to emulate springtime here in western New York, so my attention has been on trying to clean and rake and freshen the gardens around my house on the good days, and looking out the window at all that I have left to do on the rainy or blustery days. So spending so much time yard gazing and planning things to do in the yard, I was recently reminded of a little spell that I performed when we first bought the house, Susie and I. And I feel like it's the perfect time to share this with the Young Crones Cafe community. So to keep this super short and sweet, I built 4 spell jars. I know Elizabeth has covered how to build a spell jar in some of her other tips, tricks, and witchy hints, so I won't go into a long detail there, except that in my particular case, what constitutes a spell jar is a glass jar with some representative of each of the 4 elements, and then some element that represents the spell that I'm trying to work. So in my case, I had something for each of the 4 elements in these 4 jars, and then I put crumbled and broken glass in a layer on these spell jars, the spell that I was trying to make for shielding and protecting the home. So then once I had these 4 spell jars all made, I went to each of the corners of our property, which also happened wonderfully to be the 4 cardinal directions, or north, south, east, and west. I went to each of the corners and I dug a small hole a couple feet down, and I buried these jars. And for my particular cases and what I was trying to accomplish, I put them lid down, and then right before I completed putting all of the dirt on them, I reached down in with the shovel and I cracked the jar so that all of those elements and the spell magic could seep into the soil around it. Now, I did this at all 4 corners of our property, and then I walked back to the 4 corners, and from standing on the jar, I looked up to the peak of our roof, and visualized a line. After going around to the four corners again, in my head was an energy pyramid from each of the four corners to the peak of the house. And that was something that Susie and I relied on for literally decades. We never had any fires. We never had any break-ins. We never had any problems. So I remember that each year. And sometimes I stand on that spot and offer a little prayer for the safety of the house and for the safety of the world around my house. If you're enjoying this sort of content and want to join the discussion, please come stir up the pot on our Discord community. The way to get there is to look for Young Crones Cafe on Patreon or browse to twoyoungcrones.com for more about us. For now, be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Well, it looks like the coffee cups are empty for this week. We hope you join us again next Tuesday, but you can find us at our website, twoyoungcrones.com. That's the number 2, Young Crones.
We'd love to have you join our growing online Discord community. Check out our new Patreon presence. Just look for Young Crones Cafe. Through Patreon, you'll be able to make it to our Discord. We are also Young Crones Cafe on Twitter and Facebook.
Until then, remember, we are witches who work with energies to effect change.
We are believers in both immanent and transcendent divine.
We are celebrants of the passage of the solar and lunar cycles.
We are hedge walkers who pass back and forth between the worlds of the magical and the mundane.
We are seekers of knowledge.
And we are walkers of a spiritual tradition we call the Path.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.